Hi everyone, welcome back to ABCD. This will be the last part of the discussion video. After this, it will go back to how it was beforehand, where I talk about one certain topic and elaborate on it. I want to say a big thank you to Rami and Napun for being in the discussion video. They were a huge help and I wouldn't be able to do this without them. Now on to the video. So my last question for today is, do you think the media affects the way that Asians are portrayed?
Yes, and I think Kelly Kapoor is a good example of how it's dangerous to portray women. Because growing up, I always thought the jokes that The Office made were still really funny, and there was nothing wrong with them. And then I started watching it again in quarantine last year, and obviously I had a more mature aspect and perspective of it than I did when I first watched it, and I saw how dangerous it was for them to portray Kelly, and she had a relationship with another coworker, Ryan, who was white, and he constantly used her and abused her for whatever he wanted, and then he left her, and so and she didn't really find herself because she was constantly dependent on him to the point where she would lose herself and the aspects of what made her who she is to this boy that used her. And I think that was really dangerous because I think that also affected me because I became the kind of person in middle school, especially, that gave out homework answers to whoever wanted them, because I was like, what's wrong with it? They want it, I can give it to them. That's what we do. And I think it was in high school where I realized I can't become someone that does that, because they're not doing it because they like me. They're doing it because they know they can use me and then just get away with it without having to do any work of their own. But then on the other side of that, there's Never Have I Ever, which also came out really recently last year, I believe. And it was an amazing portrayal of Devi, who's the female lead, which is also really surprising to see because she's Indian, and she was the strong character who was torn between two guys, but eventually she found her own self-worth within herself, which I think is an amazing message for kids growing up now, and is also something I wish I could have seen something like this growing up. But I'm really happy people are getting the representation that they need now, at least.
Yeah, it's a great example you bring up of The Office. I think going back to what I said earlier about the way that kind of Indians are portrayed in kids shows, just for a few examples, Baljeet from Phineas and Ferb. Of course, you have Ravi from Jesse, Shirag Gupta from Diary Wimpy Kid. They're all seen as these smart kind of small kids that are prodigies, geniuses in what they do, but kind of lack in the social skills department. And then as a result, they're often the butt of the joke or kind of made fun of easily. And that's really hard to see as an Indian kid or Indian American kid, just looking at that, seeing that's how people look at you, and kind of has a negative effect on your personality. But now there are strides being made to change that view of Indian Americans, and I think that's really good.
I feel like the media also portrays Asians as unlovable in a sense, they're never the love interest. And as a person that's very filmy, that kind of hurts. Because I'm oh, okay, I guess I don't get my perfect love story then. But on the flip side, since we also have the Bollywood industry in our lives, or Mollywood, Tollywood, all those industries, it's always the light skin that always gets the girl or the boy, and it's usually a toxic form of that. He harasses you until you're forced to say, oh, fine, I do love you.
I think the Diary of Wimpy Kids was a great example, because I remember specifically, I don't know if they showed it in the movies, but I know in the book there was a practical joke they played on him, where they all pretended they couldn't see him or hear him. First reading it through, I was oh, there's something wrong with this. It's just a joke. And obviously the author's great. He's really well written. But looking back on it, I think it's dangerous to portray yourself as someone that's basically invisible. You were shown as an invisible character just in the background. You could see how it affected him, and everybody, they were all oh, it's just a joke. Just learn how to take a joke. And I was thinking back on it now as a 16-year-old, I'm even if it's a joke, pretending to be invisible, or having to pretend to be invisible to your friends is really dangerous, because suddenly it's do I matter? Do you see me for who I am, or do you see me for my skin color? I think that's a good question that it raises up.
Yeah, I think Neha brought up a real good point about how Bollywood affects the portrayal of Asian Americans or Indians. Just in general, there's so many things you can talk about, whether it's the skin color of the lead actors, if they're all, fair skinned, or kind of the regions where they come from. There's a lot of stereotypes in those movies about kind of North Indians or South Indians or any sort of religions. But some movies also do a really good job of examining those complexities and, making them relatable to a sense. I remember this movie I watched. I believe it was called Two States, where they showed kind of love story between a man from Punjab and like a girl from South India, and kind of the different values of their families and how that led to conflict and disagreements. But they still love each other for who they were, not necessarily their backgrounds. And if we have more movies like that that kind of examine how we may be different, but we're all the same, or we all have the shared set of values, then that could be pretty beneficial for society.
I really like the new generation of movies, like Tapid, that came out and talked about domestic abuse, and then what else? There's like another Malayalam movie I didn't watch, but my parents did. It was like about the oath of silence and how she broke out of that. And there's like a bunch more coming out, and I'm really happy with the way it's directed, and I really want to see it continue to go down that path. Even in like the American industry, like Nupan said earlier, like what is it? Crazy Rich Asians, how it like portrayed Asians. It honestly made me cry watching that because I'm like, I've never seen this many Asians at one time.
I think the domestic abuse. I don't know if you watch the movies, but Drishyam and Drishyam 2, they talk about not it's not domestic abuse, but like harassment, especially how in the first movie the boy ends up like he doesn't survive because of what he was doing to the girl. The second movie is like all about the plot of like what happened previously. But I think the harassment that they show is dangerous, but like it's also a good portrayal of like what you go through in real life. Like there are people that will not stop harassing you until you give them what they want. And that's how they were raised. They're like, if I keep doing this, I will get what I want, and like it's what I deserve, and that's how like their mind is set. And obviously that's something we need to change because we can't have like movies that portray a man getting whatever they want just because they're male and they can do what they want. And like I think that plays into the patriarchal values that we have in India. And I think that Ashim was like a really good example of like the girl defending herself and her family coming to her aid too, which is also really surprising because usually the family's like, yeah, well, you're a girl,
It's your fault.
yeah. So like I think that was a really good example of the family being like, okay, no, like you have to stop, back off. This is my daughter. I protect my family because it's my blood. Like you don't get to get whatever you want just because you're you. So
I feel like a lot of the old Bollywood movies, especially like the Shah Rukh Khan ones, I love him with the bottom of my heart, but his movies romanticize like being a stalker and falling for the girl, or like the girl falling for you. For an example, like Dar, it's a very good example. He plays like a psychotic lover. He does die in the end, but still, it romanticizes him falling in love with Karan and like going after her. And I think like at a certain point she does fall for him, and then like a lot of Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, that shows like him going at Simran over and over again, and like even going to India to stop her wedding.
Yeah, kind of going off topic, going back to the thing about how the media affects how Asians are portrayed in society. I think as long as we have this continued increase in representation of Asians in media, especially like Western media, American media, it can do nothing but good. Because, like I said, there's new roles or new looks that people have. Like, okay, I can be this, I can do this. I specifically mentioned in the comedy field, like Hassan Minhaj or Aziz Ansari. Like, I didn't know of any prominent Indian American comedians, so I saw his act on Netflix, and he really spoke about some of the things that I've gone through, really relatable things. And it opened up. Okay, this is a potential career for him. I'm not very funny, but it's still something you can look at, and it's really nice to see, especially continuing the arts, whether it be sportscasting or comedy or any of these other roles that aren't really filled by Asian Americans, as they continue to be filled, and that glass ceiling is broken by this generation and the next generation, we're looking towards a bright future, I think.
I definitely think like our generation and the generation under us are definitely gonna break that stereotype, because like our parents' generation, our motto was, you're Asian, just do what you're told and you'll be successful. It does not matter what the other people say. All that matters is just focusing on you. But I feel like we're all just so much more vocal about what we go through.